Did you know that Keanu Reeves, the guy everyone calls the nicest man in Hollywood, has been carrying a secret heartbreak his entire life? The world knows him as a legend, but nobody knew the real story about his father, until now. Just days ago, Keanu broke down in tears on live TV, mentioning his dad for the first time ever. What he revealed. It's going to change the way you see him forever. It started like every other late-night interview. Laughter, flashing lights, and that usual Hollywood energy in the room. Jimmy Kimmel had Keanu Reeves on his show again, a fan favorite. Everyone loves Keanu. He's the internet's boyfriend, right? The guy who takes the subway like a normal human, gives away millions to charity, and somehow manages to stay humble while being one of the biggest stars on earth. So yeah, people were expecting fun. They were expecting maybe a few behind-the-scenes stories from John Wick 5 or a funny prank Keanu might have pulled on set. Instead, they got something else. Something no one saw coming. Jimmy was in good form that night. His jokes were hitting. The audience was with him. And Keanu was doing his usual thing, that calm, low-energy, soft-spoken vibe that somehow makes him even cooler. He smiled politely, nodded along, and answered a few light questions. But then Jimmy asked that question. "So, Keanu," Jimmy said with a grin, "I heard your dad used to tell you wild stories when you were a kid. Is that where you got your love for storytelling?" Right there. That was the moment. That single sentence changed everything about the interview. You could almost hear the gears stop turning in Keanu's head as soon as the word dad left Jimmy's mouth. For a second, the whole vibe of the room shifted. The laughter stopped. The smiles faded. Even Jimmy could sense that something was off. But he didn't know why yet. Keanu froze. Not dramatically, not in some over-the-top Hollywood way, it was subtle. The smile slowly dropped from his face. His eyes, they didn't just look sad. They looked tired. Like someone who's been carrying a weight for too long and suddenly dropped it right there on live TV. The audience chuckled awkwardly, not sure if this was part of a joke they weren't getting. Even the camera crew hesitated. You know it's bad when a professional live show feels like someone just pressed pause on life. And then Keanu spoke. Quietly, like he wasn't sure if he should say it, but something inside him decided, enough hiding. "I've never spoken about my father publicly, until now." 16 words. That's all it took to make millions of people lean forward in their chairs. 16 words that sent a shockwave through the audience, through the producers in the control room, through Jimmy himself. Who, for the first time in years, didn't have a comeback ready. The silence in that studio was thick. You could feel it through the screen if you were watching at home. Even the clinking of a water glass backstage sounded too loud. What was supposed to be another polished, feel-good Hollywood interview had just cracked wide open into something way more real. And it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't promoted on posters. There were no teaser clips before commercial break. It was just a man breaking a silence he'd carried since childhood. People didn't know much about Keanu's father. Sure, hardcore fans might have read a passing headline here and there, but Keanu had made it his personal mission to never talk about that chapter of his life. He'd talk about stunts, motorcycles, working with Lawrence Fishburne, but never him. Never his father. And now, here he was, on one of the biggest talk shows in America, eyes already starting to glass over, deciding in that moment that maybe it was finally time. But why now? Why, after decades of staying silent, did Keanu choose this moment, on this show, to open up? Was it planned? Was it just one of those emotional things you can't predict? Nobody in that room had the answer yet. But they were about to find out. Keanu Reeves is one of those rare celebrities who feels more like a friend than a movie star. Everyone knows his kindness. The viral clips of him giving up his seat on the subway. The countless stories of him quietly donating millions to cancer research after his sister's battle. The man's a walking legend. But there's one part of his life he's never been open about. One part that stayed locked up like a room with the door nailed shut. His father. The story of Keanu's dad isn't a Hollywood fairy tale, it's a tragedy no director would dare touch because it's not the kind that sells movie tickets. It's raw, messy, painful. And up until this moment on Jimmy Kimmel's stage, it was untold. Keanu was born in Beirut, Lebanon, but his early life wasn't the start of some glamorous movie star journey. His father, Samuel Nowlin Reeves Jr., was a man with a sharp mind but sharper demons. Drugs, crime, arrests. By the time Keanu was only 3 years old, his father was gone, abandoning Keanu, his mother, and his siblings to figure out life alone. 3 years old. Just think about that. Most of us can't even remember what we were doing at 3. But Keanu? That's the age when his life got hard. Growing up, it wasn't about wondering if he'd get the newest toys or the coolest shoes. It was about wondering why the man who helped bring him into the world didn't want to stay in it with him. Keanu didn't grow up with father-son camping trips or catch games in the backyard. He grew up with questions. The kind that sit in your heart and make you wonder if something's wrong with you. As if a 3-year-old could ever be the reason an adult walks away. And here's the thing, it wasn't just that his father left. It was that no one talked about it. Hollywood didn't ask. Interviewers didn't bring it up. Even fans who knew the story never pressed him for details. Why? Because Keanu kept that chapter of his life buried. And honestly? Who could blame him? But that night, under the glare of stage lights and cameras rolling, it was like the dam finally cracked. You could see it on his face. This wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't planned with PR people, this was real. With his voice barely above a whisper, Keanu started sharing pieces of that broken past. I used to wonder if I'd ever be enough for him to stay, he said, eyes locked on the desk in front of him. You don't get those answers when you're a kid. You just learn to live with the silence. Man. That line hit harder than any action scene he's ever done. Forget dodging bullets in The Matrix. This was the real fight. The emotional fight kids of broken homes have to live with every single day. The audience didn't clap. Not because they didn't care, but because they did. Everyone sitting in that room felt the same thing. This isn't acting, this is someone showing their real scars. Keanu had built his entire public image around kindness and humility, but now it made sense why. The generosity, the calmness, the quiet heartbreak you could always kind of sense behind his eyes. It all connected back to this moment, this memory, this father who walked away. And now, on national television, with millions watching, Keanu finally spoke the truth. And that truth? It wasn't pretty. But it was real. Up until that night on Jimmy Kimmel's stage, the world thought they knew Keanu Reeves. The action hero. The internet's good guy. The movie star who somehow never let Hollywood change him. But what nobody knew, what no journalist had ever uncovered, was that Keanu's story with his father didn't just end with abandonment. It didn't stop at age 3. It came back. And the way it came back? It wasn't a warm reunion. It wasn't a dramatic Hollywood embrace at the airport. No tearful apologies. No hugs in the rain. It was a letter. And that's where the real heartbreak started. Keanu sat there on that stage, looking like the weight of decades was pressing down on his shoulders. His fingers gripped the edge of Jimmy's desk, knuckles whitening as the memory flooded in. For a guy who's dodged bullets on screen and fought armies of bad guys in John Wick, this was the fight he'd been avoiding his whole life. He started explaining to Jimmy and the stunned audience that his father had written to him when Keanu's star began to rise in Hollywood. Not during his childhood. Not during the painful teenage years when a boy really needs guidance. No. It happened after he became famous. After Speed. After The Matrix. After Keanu had already carved his own name in stone, alone. And this letter? It wasn't the kind of thing a son dreams of receiving from a long-lost father. It didn't say, "I'm proud of you." It didn't say, "I'm sorry for leaving you." It said this, "Do you ever think you'd be where you are without me?" That was it. No love. No apology. Just ego. Just bitterness. Just a father who couldn't handle the fact that the son he abandoned didn't need him to succeed. And sitting there under the hot lights of the studio, Keanu's voice cracked as he told the story. I read that letter over and over again when I got it, he said quietly. Not because I liked it. Not because it made me happy. But because I couldn't believe, after everything, that's what he wanted to say to me. Can you imagine that? Years of silence. Years of unanswered questions. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, the first words your father sends you are basically, "Don't forget where you came from, kid, you owe me." But Keanu didn't owe him anything. Everything Keanu built, every role, every success, every time he quietly helped strangers on the street, he did that despite his father, not because of him. That letter wasn't just words on paper. It was a second abandonment. A confirmation that the man who should have been Keanu's hero was still stuck in the same bitterness that made him leave in the first place. The part that really broke the audience, and probably Jimmy himself, was what Keanu said next. That was the moment, he said, his voice low but steady, when I realized, not all fathers are heroes. Let that sink in. Not all fathers are heroes. It's a truth nobody likes to admit. Society teaches us that dads are supposed to be strong, wise, protectors. But for Keanu, his father was the opposite. And for the first time ever, millions of people watching at home saw why Keanu has always seemed a little more humble, a little more grounded, a little more human than the usual Hollywood star. This wasn't just a sad story, this was his story. And right there, live on national television, Keanu shared the ugliest, most painful part of it, not because he wanted sympathy, but because hiding it for so long had become too heavy. And now, the whole world knew. After that brutal letter, you'd think anyone would break. Anyone else might have gone off the rails, spiraled into drinking, lashed out at the press, or disappeared from Hollywood altogether. But Keanu? Nah. That's not his style. See, this is the part of Keanu's story that nobody talks about, the part where the pain didn't destroy him. It built him. He didn't respond to that letter. Not a single word. And it wasn't because he didn't have things to say. It's because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give silence to the people who don't deserve your voice. And Keanu learned that young. But that letter, that pathetic grab for credit from a man who did nothing but leave scars, flipped a switch in him. It was like Keanu finally realized that no apology was ever coming. No explanation. No happy reunion. This wasn't going to be one of those cheesy, "I forgive you, Dad" moments in the third act of a movie. This was real life. And in real life, sometimes you gotta build yourself without closure. So Keanu did exactly that. Instead of getting bitter, he got better. He started pouring his energy into his craft. Not just acting, but kindness. That's why every time someone shares a viral video of Keanu helping strangers, or donating millions to cancer research, or giving up parts of his salary so stunt teams could get paid more, this is where it comes from. It wasn't just good PR like it is for other celebrities. For Keanu, it was therapy. Giving to others became the healing he never got from the man who was supposed to give it first. And that's what hit people hardest that night on Jimmy Kimmel. Not the sadness of the story, but the strength that came out of it. Keanu wasn't sitting there begging for sympathy. He wasn't trying to get people to cry for him. He was showing the world that you don't have to be defined by the ones who abandoned you. And when Jimmy finally broke the silence, his voice didn't have that usual playful, sarcastic tone. It was soft. Respectful. "I had no idea, man," Jimmy said. That's heavy." Keanu smiled, but not the kind of smile you give when something's funny. It was the kind of smile you give when you've been through hell, survived it, and learned how to carry it. "It's okay," Keanu replied. "You don't need a perfect beginning to build a good life." Boom. Right there. That line should have been carved into stone. It was like he wasn't just speaking for himself anymore, he was speaking for every single person out there who's been abandoned, betrayed, or broken by someone who was supposed to love them first. The internet exploded after that. Within minutes, Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it now, was flooded with clips of that moment. TikTokers were putting inspirational music behind it, quoting that one sentence over videos of people overcoming hardships. You don't need a perfect beginning to build a good life. For the first time in late-night talk show history, it wasn't the host going viral, it was the guest, just by telling the truth. Keanu had carried that pain for decades like a backpack full of bricks. And in that one interview, it was like he finally dropped it at the world's feet and said, "Here it is. Take a look." But here's the best part. That moment wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The world loves a comeback story. But what they don't tell you is that the best comebacks don't happen on red carpets or at award shows. Sometimes, they happen when someone finally takes the weight off their chest and breathes for the first time in years. That night on Jimmy Kimmel, Keanu Reeves didn't just tell a sad story about a broken father-son relationship. He gave the world something bigger: permission. Permission to stop pretending that family is always perfect. Permission to stop chasing apologies that will never come. Permission to move forward without closure. As the cameras kept rolling, Keanu did what he always does: he chose grace. No anger. No trash talk about his father. Just truth. Just real. And it hit people hard because everyone knows that pain. Maybe not the exact same story, but we've all had someone who was supposed to love us fail. A parent. A friend. A partner. Someone who should have been in our corner, but wasn't. And that's why this wasn't just Keanu's story anymore, it was ours too. When the interview ended, the usual applause felt different. It wasn't just polite clapping to fill the silence between commercial breaks. It was respect. The audience knew they hadn't just watched another celebrity promo. They had witnessed a release. A man letting go of decades of weight in front of millions, not to sell a movie, but to heal. And the healing didn't stop in that studio. The clip of Keanu's confession went viral globally within hours. Headlines everywhere: Keanu Reeves opens up about his father for the first time. Keanu's silent pain, the letter that changed everything. You don't need a perfect beginning to build a good life. Keanu Reeves breaks the internet. People weren't just watching the clip, they were relating to it. Comment sections on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter flooded with personal stories. I haven't spoken to my father in 10 years. This hit hard. I needed to hear this today. Thank you, Keanu. I always wondered why Keanu seemed so grounded. Now I get it. What a legend. For the first time, Keanu wasn't trending because of a blockbuster or some wild Hollywood stunt. He was trending because he reminded people of something real: that pain can either bury you or build you. And Keanu? He used it as a blueprint. In the days that followed, even celebrities started weighing in. Actors, musicians, influencers, people you'd never expect were suddenly reposting that clip, sharing their own broken family stories, all inspired by Keanu's honesty. And the most beautiful part? Keanu didn't follow it up with a new product, a new show, or a PR tour. He didn't use that vulnerable moment to promote himself. He just let it exist, raw, unpolished, true. And that's why it mattered. That's why it resonated. Because the world's tired of fake, tired of staged drama, tired of celebrities pretending to be relatable. Keanu gave them truth. And in a world full of filters, that truth hit hard. But here's the kicker: that wasn't the last we heard of the story. A week later, quietly, with no press coverage, no paparazzi, Keanu was spotted visiting a children's hospital in Los Angeles. No cameras, no security, no announcements. Just him, sitting with kids, talking about life, handing out toys, making them laugh. Because that's who he is. A man who took the worst parts of his past and used them as fuel to bring light into other people's lives. And maybe that's why Keanu's legacy won't be defined by The Matrix or John Wick or any Hollywood paycheck. It'll be defined by the fact that in a world full of noise, he chose kindness. Over and over again. Quietly. Gently. Relentlessly. So the next time you see Keanu Reeves riding the subway or hear another story about him giving away millions without telling anyone, just remember where it came from. It came from that letter. It came from the heartbreak. It came from a father who walked away, and a son who stood up anyway. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just sit in the back of late-night studios, quietly breaking the internet, one honest sentence at a time. Keanu's story isn't just about a broken family, it's about building your life, even when the people who were supposed to love you leave. And maybe that's the real lesson here: you don't need a perfect start to create a powerful ending. If this story hit you, drop a comment below. I want to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories Hollywood doesn't want you to hear.